Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Schowalter. Doing a little media availability so we can all look through the shutdown information and the report that we're providing you, answer any questions, and hopefully make sure that we all have sort of some of the same information. As you all should have a copy now, there's copies also being sent around. As you orient yourselves and try to find some of the facts that you're most looking for, just want to do some introductions. As I said, I'm Jim Schowalter, Commissioner of Management and Budget. With me are several of the members of the SCRT, our command team during the shutdown. And I would just like to say personally, it's just an invaluable service to the state, to the agency, to the public in making sure that some of the unforeseen consequences of the shutdown didn't materialize, that we tried to manage the risks as well as possible. They include Lynn Anderson, Deputy Commissioner at MMB, Kathy Hockert, our leader and coordinator of so many things, Laurie Hansen from our Human Resources team, Charlie Bielik from our Budget team, John Pollard from Communications, also from the Governor's Office, Dana Anderson and Andrea Makros were frequent and vital contributors to this effort. The group grew and shrank depending on the circumstances, but it was certainly vital during the shutdown and vital in putting together this report. What you have in front of you is an attempt to answer some of the questions that we've received in past weeks and months. As we get into it, I think you're going to find that the answers oftentimes are complicated, that this is data that is not easily estimated. We've tried our best to give you as clear a response to some of those questions as possible and anticipate some of the other questions that you might have. But nonetheless, there's differences in timing, how the data is collected, and really comparing with what would have happened, which are reasonable questions but difficult to estimate. We've nonetheless tried to put those into the report. Also included in the report some useful lists. I think you'll see on page 4 some handy statistics about what happened during the shutdown. Page 5, some of the challenges that we faced. And back on page 18 and 19, a complete list of the agencies who was shut down, who was not shut down, as well as the number of employees who were working for state government during that period of time. So let's get started. What you have before you is a report on the 2011 Minnesota state shutdown. I think there's several important messages and points that you can come away from it, but certainly we provide a lot of data, a lot of information. I think everyone will find different subtexts and different stories within it. Some of the things that I pull out of the report include, first of all, because of the court orders, the state shutdown really was a partial shutdown. Nearly $4 out of $5 continued to flow to health care providers, to educators, to local units of government, as promised. As a result, the broad economic impact and public service disruption that was possible from the shutdown really didn't occur because most of the dollars that the state normally promises to its partners continued to flow. Second of all, at the broadest level, the shutdown didn't create new budgetary gaps. We lost revenues for sure. We incurred new costs for sure. They were, by and large, counteracted by savings, almost entirely borne by state employees through salaries not paid. And finally, that this is a difficult story for you all to cover. It's a difficult story for me to summarize because average doesn't really tell the story. Where there was harm, it was significant harm. Some places continued unaffected. Others continued and were completely shut down. So as a result, when you look at the impact of employees, those who continued to work were less and not so impacted. Those who were laid off had substantial stresses and issues. We certainly saw a spike in the number of employee assistance calls for financial assistance and questions. We certainly saw a very strong demand on our website to understand what's going on. The questions and the uncertainty was palpable. If you're looking at the natural resources funding, resources and activities in the parks, very strong impacts. When you're looking at transportation contractors and the work with our contractors both currently and in the future, you'll see continuing stories and difficulties. So the average doesn't always tell you the case, doesn't tell you the full picture, and we try to give you some of the detail in this report. By and large, I think we included a number of different pieces of information that hopefully will be useful to you. As you try to get into more detail, we on page 12 talk about the lost revenues through compliance, lost compliance revenues, other types of fees and activities. We also detail the new costs to prepare for the shutdown on page 13 through 15, as well as the impacts of employees and salary savings within the state. In the end, what we're looking here at is an attempt to calculate some of the costs, some of the budgetary impacts, when really there's also the biggest story, which is just the human impact, the impact on the workforce, on the state's reputation, and all the other well-known costs of the state shutdown. So hopefully this will be a useful piece of information for you. I would be happy to address any questions along with members of the SCRT that you might have.
Commissioner, I haven't just glanced through this, but are there some transportation contractors? You mentioned transportation contractors. You said they had some difficulties, but did they file claims, and is that reported in here somewhere? I didn't see it.
No, and good question, because really what we have right now is a state of time. We have estimated costs that we know of, impacts that we know of. There are likely to be lingering impacts, and work with our transportation contractors are one example, strong example, of costs and impacts that will continue on forward. Because of the state works with contractors in this instance, they may have borne some of the risk, they may have incurred some of the cost, and whether through work with MnDOT under these current contracts or in future costs in construction projects going into the future, certainly there will be resulting impacts going forward.
But this report, just to be clear, and I haven't read the whole thing, there's not really a ripple effect here on the economy?
At this point, when we look at the jobs numbers, as we look at the GDP numbers, we are not seeing a huge ripple effect on the Minnesota economy. There's very isolated and very strong impacts in sub-elements of the economy. If a business is near a park, that's impacted strongly. If you're a state employee, you're impacted strongly. But as a state, because 4 out of 5 dollars continue to flow, the broad impact of the shutdown really didn't occur.
So we could deduce from this that shutdown is not fine, but it's just okay. We could have more of these because it doesn't really have an impact on the state.
Only if we're okay with continuing to damage our state's credibility in the business community and the financial markets. Only if we're okay with impairing our ability to retain and recruit state employees into the future. And only if we're okay with periodic cessation of public services and low performance. Then I guess the shutdown's okay. But otherwise, the shutdown really does have an impact.
But if that's what it takes to get to a lower spending, no tax hikes, if that's what it takes, it sounds like there is no real economic impact.
The economic impact, in large measure, was blunted by court-ordered spending. So when we talk about a state shutdown, we think about a capital S shutdown when it's really a very small case shutdown. That education spending, nearly 40% of the state budget continues to go, for the most part. When we talk about human services spending with nursing home providers, clinics, hospitals, individual payments, by and large, those continue to flow. Local aids and credits actually didn't go out the door, but nonetheless could have and would have had it not been for the special session. Those would go out the door. So the broadest impacts and the largest parts of the state budget were continued payment, promised continued payment by the courts. And as a result, you don't see the broad impact that you're expecting, Pat.
Commissioner, were you surprised at these findings at all? Some people, some Minnesotans might find it a bit surprising that that the impact has been minimal. What's your reaction to the results?
I think we knew, even as the shutdown was occurring, with our understanding of the court orders and where the real dollars are in the state budget, that there was sort of a mismatch between expectations that state employees delivered all the services in the state budget. State employees don't deliver all the services. We have private vendors, we have local units of government, we have many partners, and most of those partners continue to be funded. So while state employees were significantly impacted, and we had many, many layoffs, 13,000 people, 15,000 people were receiving a UI, as documented in the report, the bottom line impact to the economy was mitigated because human services, a large chunk of the budget, continued, because education payments continued.
Is that what you expected?
Yeah. Yeah, we knew as we were going through the court orders, through the governor's recommendations of the court, and then further amendments that came from the courts, we knew that large chunks of the state budget continued.
So in terms of money lost to the states, you've got the $49.7 million in unrecoverable revenues, the recovery and preparation costs of about $10 million, and that's it, essentially?
Yeah, and it is, we're getting into the what-if scenario, which I think is a real difficulty that Charlie Bielik of our team, Department of Revenue, tried to sleuth through. What would we expect, what really occurred? These are our estimates. Certainly, there are probably some secondary impacts, but these were the ones that, as we worked with agencies to document what happened, what they expected to happen, and tried to aggregate that for this report, these are some of the things that came up.
And then the employee cost of $65 million, you say state and federal. Can you break that down a bit? Explain what that means.
I'm going to ask for a help from Charlie in breaking down between the two. But basically, state employees are funded through a number of different funding sources. We think of them all coming out of the general fund, but actually no. Many work out of the Trunk Highway Fund. Many work on programs that are funded by federal funds. Others are from fees and licenses, things like that. And so as a result, there's a breakdown of where employees are not receiving their salary and which funding source ended up benefiting from it. So it's not like all state dollars were saved. It's not like the state's still holding all the money that wasn't paid out during that period.
With this, I'll try to. With the way that this shaped up, I mean, was this sustainable, or did there become a point where things would sort of fall off the cliff and become dramatically worse for the state?
I think you probably have as good an idea as that as I do. I certainly, as we mentioned, I think on page 5 or so, there's just a series of challenges and risks that we tried to manage as best possible. And it was unclear to anyone who was following the shutdown what challenge or risk was going to occur on any given day. Nobody would have assumed that public safety licenses necessarily were going to be a big issue mid-July. We weren't anticipating that. I don't know what would happen the next day. Certainly, we were always under incurring significant risks financially, in terms of the controls, in terms of the IT infrastructure, in terms of the assets. All of those were in peril during the shutdown.
Shutdown, Commissioner, were you in contact, how often were you in contact with Governor Dayton regarding some of these challenges, some of the where the money's going, things you didn't expect? Were you on top of that as it happened day by day?
Absolutely, and that's the only way we survived. The governor was very much aware of that. That's why we had particularly Dana Anderson, Deputy Chief of Staff, involved in the command team, because we all needed to make very quick and real-time decisions. The story of the shutdown and managing the shutdown really is one of constantly assessing the situation, understanding what's going on, making decisions, and reassessing the next day.
And then following up on what Barrett is asking, then does it come a point where you're in day 17, 18, 19, and you're advising the governor this is getting to be dangerous?
I think the governor and legislative leaders understood it was dangerous from the very beginning. I think the public understood it was dangerous from the very beginning, and it's hard because this was an unprecedented dispute, and unprecedented in the breadth of the shutdown, unprecedented in the sort of the changing circumstances. So I think day 1 was just as dangerous as day 20.
In terms of its, and this gets to what Pat was asking earlier, but in terms of its power to help discourage governors and legislators from going down this path again, it really doesn't make much of a cautionary tale, does it?
I think the budgetary impact isn't the cautionary tale. I think the impact on the state's reputation, on the performance and delivery of state services and the impact on state employees and our workforce, those are extremely difficult and problematic issues that came up because of the shutdown. They don't have direct budget costs right now, but they're things that we're going to be dealing with for years to come.
Commissioner, what do you say to the folks who, in the public, who listen to folks say the sky is going to fall, and now they're looking at this and saying, well, it really didn't? I mean, it seems like, at the end of the day, the sky didn't fall as hard as they were suggesting. So what do you say to those folks who think, what's the big deal?
Well, you leave 4 out of the 5 pillars of the house intact, and you take out one of them, chances are the house may not completely fall as spectacularly as you expected. And that's really what happened with the state budget. There may have been some crumbles, there may have been some cracks, there may have been some very clear damages to anyone underneath that one pillar. But sizable portions of the state budget continued because of court orders. And so it is a high-risk strategy. It's still not well defined by the courts as to what would happen if there were to be another shutdown going forward. It's still, I think, an issue before the Supreme Court. It's still a very unclear and murky legal situation.
Commissioner, I'm not sure if you addressed this, but it looks like there was $65 million in lost payroll. Is that a small enough number to not really have a ripple effect in the economy, the $65 million that these employees couldn't spend through the economy? Are they the other ones other than the state reputation who maybe suffered the most?
Yeah, certainly. State employees certainly most directly suffered. Those who were laid off had pretty significant financial and emotional questions because you just don't know if you're going to be working one day or another. They also end up cleaning up the mess after it was all over. So you come back and you try and figure out how to get things back rolling. You look at the backlog of things that didn't occur. And after being unpaid for 20 days, it's a bitter situation to try and work through. I think they've done so miraculously with good cheer, and I think that's part of the untold story about how people have really dealt with this situation. I've continued to talk, and I'm trying to remember the specific question. So,
$65 million. Is that a small enough number in the total economy that there's not going to be a big ripple effect that they didn't have that money to spend?
It is, although anybody looking at the deed numbers for unemployment the last couple of months see that it's a big enough ripple that it's a noticeable element to their smoothing of our state's unemployment numbers. So, it's a ripple. It's a noticeable piece. It's not big enough to significantly impact the state's GDP. If we had stopped all state spending, so that it wasn't just state employees who were financing the shutdown, but that all state dollars stopped, you would certainly have noticed a much larger impact on the GDP.
Commissioner, of the 19,000 state employees who were laid off, how many returned to work?
Nearly all. I think on the bottom of one of the pages we note that about 125 people did not return to work. That is certainly the immediate count on page 7. I believe there will be lingering issues. It's as an employer and as a commissioner of management and budget in our state's human resources office, it's not a good idea to tell your employees randomly to go home, not work. By the way, now you've got a couple weeks to go think about other options. Go network, go do interviews. So 125 didn't come back immediately. I would expect there's also longer-term impact as well.
Commissioner, during the shutdown, your department declined to release any of the discussions behind the scenes, any of the plans, any of the preparations, in part, you said, because of security reasons. I see in the report here that you believe that the shutdown, that the media reports of a shutdown made the state vulnerable to cyber attack. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
It doesn't mean that the media was responsible as much as we had information that within the technology world, the state was certainly at significant risk. Being a newsworthy target, not having its full complement of people available, and uncertain controls and protections available to its fairly large IT network. We have obviously secure data. We have sensitive data. We have networks that were vulnerable. It's not because of any particular media report as much as we were topical, and that caught some bad people's attention.
I didn't ask the question well. Setting aside the media reports, the state was at significant risk for cyber attack, and you just indicated that you may have noticed something, you may have stopped something?
I have not. I don't think our command team has. Certainly the Office of Enterprise Technology was aware and closely monitoring the situation. We talked with them extensively before the shutdown and during the shutdown to make sure that they had the necessary resources to button down the systems as well as possible. That being said, it's part of the overall risk when you don't have people, when you're making up procedures on the fly. And yes, there were risks.
What surprised you most about the shutdown, looking back on it?
Probably that more of the risks, more of the uncertainties didn't blow up. That we entered a period where we were managing uncertainties every day, going into the shutdown, and once July 1st came as well. And I think the level of really exceptional work that people did to maintain the state's assets, to keep the morale of state employees, and protect the citizenry was quite remarkable, because we were entering a period where we really didn't have legal authorities very clear. We didn't have operational authorities very clear, and we had circumstances that were changing rapidly. So I think probably the most surprising thing is that we made it through. And to the earlier question, I think that's the cautionary tale for any future shutdowns. You don't know whether it's going to go as uneventfully as this one did.
Despite that, does this in any sense sort of devalue the whole idea of a government shutdown? Do you feel like going forward it's not going to be this perhaps looming threat that it's been treated as in the past?
I hope not. I certainly, for anybody within government, and I believe the legislature wouldn't see this as being a desirable state. And certainly if you look at the state's credit rating and what they're saying about us, if you look and talk about the business climate and how the state's brand for getting things done has been impaired, when you look at state employees and the need for continuing to recruit and retain talented people to deliver services, I can't see how you come to that conclusion.
Commissioner, it sure seems to me like the courts are the ones who kind of stepped in on this and were the ones who were effective at the time when the legislature and the governor weren't effective at all. Is that a fair characterization?
Certainly the question of spending authority had to be resolved by the courts. The Constitution is very clear that the commissioner cannot allow any money to leave the state treasury without an appropriation. And with all but one appropriation bill unresolved, how much education money could be spent, how much necessary public safety money could be spent was really a significant legal question that fortunately David Lillehog, the Attorney General's office, and others tried to address with the courts. And it was, and if not for quite extraordinary efforts on all of their parts, we would have had none of the spending occur, and we would have had an even more significant legal mess.
Is there any pending legal action from private entities toward the state proceeding from shutdown activities?
I would expect, but I don't have documented, that contractors, vendors, people who have worked with state agencies may have outstanding claims and questions about responsibilities of their state partners. And so there are going to be, in all likelihood, some additional costs and impacts to the shutdown going forward. But we have not tried to quantify that at this point.
And is this going to have any impact on the budget forecast at all, in any way, shape, or form?
I wouldn't. I would not expect it to. The shutdown is already past us. If you look at the August-September revenue estimates, you have a set of information of where we were, how we closed the year. So I would not expect this to be a feature. All right, I think we're all getting tired. Thank you very much, and appreciate you coming.